The tragic deaths of Eddie Sachs and Dave McDonald the previous year have led to new safety regulations for 1965. Cars must run methanol fuel in fire-protected tanks, and the tanks are smaller with a minimum of 2 pit stops mandatory. The tide to rear-engine cars has truly been turned this year, as only a handful of front-engine roadsters make it to the field.
So yes, we've got 2 Novis actually on the second row. The front-engine cars, the rear-engine versus front-engine cars are going to be very interesting to watch as we go racing. Has the tide actually turned? As we head into turn 1, just got an intro from Bob Jenkins there, and Jimmy Clark and Parnelli Jones in hot pursuit. Those 2 Lotus chassis cars chasing down my Bronner, and we are racing at the 1965 Indianapolis 500. I guess McDonald and Sachs died in some other sort of accident in the 1964 season, because they certainly didn't die here when we ran the race last year at the 500. But heading off into turn 3, yes, my rear-engine Bronner is working quite well through turn number 3 and beginning to pull out a bit of a lead on Jimmy Clark and Parnelli Jones. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of the race, the difference between the roadsters and the rear-engine cars is, boy, turn 4 almost bit me there, is going to be key, because the roadsters generally can make the entire 50 laps without a pit stop, while the rear-engine cars most definitely need a pit stop. So that is going to be the key to today's race. When everybody takes their pit stop, how is that going to shake the field up? And of course, got some very fast guys coming from the back of the field. AJ Foyt, Dan Gurney, Mario Andretti, guys who you would suspect would be qualifying at the front, but right now they are mired in 28th, 29th, and 30th, so they actually haven't moved up from their starting positions, which is fairly interesting. Now, of course, there's always the question of will there be a crash? There almost, I won't say almost always, but a lot of times in these 500s,
Car number 81
and
is smoking. Car number 81
almost as on cue,
Car number 25
there's
is
what I imagine is a pretty big crash, because there's at least 2 cars involved, as you heard. So yeah, that is going to be part of this issue, is that cars are going to crash, cars are going to knock themselves out of the race, or at least create debris, create havoc
17 makes a pit stop
throughout the field. And 17 is Dan Gurney. So Dan Gurney was involved in that wreck. I would imagine that it was Gurney probably trying to make his way up through the field and unfortunately having contact. So what's interesting about Dan Gurney's 1965 car, and I probably should have pointed out in qualifying, is that it's very similar to the car that Connor Daly ran at this year's Indy 500. I think they took a little bit of inspiration from it to put together Connor Daly's car for this year's 500, at least in the number font, of course. I know everybody will say, well, Connor Daly's car was inspired by a Thunderbird, and yes, that's true, but I think it was also inspired by Dan Gurney's 65 Yamaha Lotus, and yes, Yamaha was the primary sponsor of the car, not the engine supplier. As we've got lap traffic already, is 1 car coming out of the pits, so here we go. We've got a 4.2 second lead over Parnelli Jones, which I don't think is nearly as big as I was able to pull out last year, as we're essentially on the final lap of what would be a qualifying effort, and it's Parnelli and it appears like Jim Clark are the 2 guys, and of course they would be because they're the front row runners, are running in lockstep behind me, and they will be the challengers, I think. I suspect that those 2 are going to be the guys to beat, depending on when I have to come into the field. And here's the other thing, is when I felt the car kind of step out on me there. Yeah, when I make my pit stop, I suspect I will probably make it earlier than everybody else will, because a lot of times in this game, when your tires go off, you really start losing a lot of pace. So what you want to do is kind of come into the pits early. That's at least what the comments have told me. At least when the tires start heating up and you really start sliding around, that's when you want to come in. So that'll probably be around lap 25, 26, 20, or 20, 30. No, lap 30, somewhere around there. 25 to 30 will probably be my first pit stop. And then I'll have to come through the field a bit. Not only the lap cars like Mickey Rupp, who's going to be the first car we're going to lap probably by 25 or 20 laps from now, 25 laps from now, he will be so far behind that I'll be able to make a pit stop and he'll just be barely out in front of me. as we make the pass underneath Rupp pretty easily and continue on down the main straightaway. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of passing later in this race because it's going to be up to me to make up all the time that I lose in the pit stop. Of course, everyone's been telling me that the rear-engine cars, everybody who's in a rear-engine car is going to have to make a stop by the end of this race. So that's going to help. It's going to help quite a bit in terms of the race strategy and how hard I have to push relative to everybody else. But Jim Clark is not really losing that much time. He's 5 seconds behind, but that's been the gap probably for the last 3 laps. And now he's starting to lose some time, so maybe we'll see here. Lap traffic, not going to know what's really going to happen there with the guys with the AI cars, Clark and Parnelli. If they can get through the lap cars better than I can, that's going to obviously help them quite a bit. But right now, as I've put a second on Jimmy Clark, it's looking pretty good right now. Looks like George Snyder's fallen to the back of the cars that have not had mechanical issues. Gurney, McCluskey, and Rupp are the cars we're going to be lapping pretty soon. Well, of course, we already lapped Rupp. So Gurney and McCluskey will be the next ones. And possibly Gurney's probably pulled away a little bit. McCluskey, I think, is in a Halibran chassis. It might even be the one I ran last year, just to kind of keep a head cannon about this series going. But yeah, there's a lot of Halibran chassis. Of course, that was the car I ran in the last year's Indianapolis 500. Probably should have gotten a win, but ended up being like 8th or something. At least got points out of it, which a lot of times the Indy 500 is what kills my championship run. And it actually saved my championship run in 1964 to be able to score points at Indianapolis. And of course, you have to consider 33 cars, but only 8 of those score points for the Indy 500. So that definitely adds a different dynamic to it. And I've run a 165-mile-an-hour lap, which is faster than qualifying. Kind of, I guess, again, using the car in the race rather than using it in qualifying. And putting up a big number is always good. AJ Foyt is up to 22nd spot, so that's going to be interesting to track his progress through the field. He actually had quite a bit of trouble in Trenton, involved in 2 separate accidents, including one with me, as 48 is in trouble. Which car is 48? I don't... And number 1, that's AJ. Well, there you go. AJ coming up through the field just as I mentioned him, and he causes a crash. And that's a big crash, it sounds like. Lots of cars involved. Okay, well, there's going to be a lot more cars in the pits. As you can see, there's at least 2, 3 cars. One of the roadsters is in, so we've already lost one of the roadsters. As we're going to come in high here. Maston Gregory's one of them. Poor Maston Gregory coming over from Formula 1, trying to kind of do the same thing that Jimmy Clark is doing right now. Look at all the debris here in Turn 2. That was where the crash occurred, and we're going to try to avoid all the debris. There was front ends, rear ends, exhaust piping, all littered through Turn 3. As Jimmy Clark still hanging on, 8.4 seconds behind early on. We've got a car down here on the apron, so we've got to be careful not to... Oh, lots of cars down here on the apron as we're coming up behind McCluskey. It's Johnny Boyd,
Car number 94,
Joe Leonard. Oh man, look at all these cars.
makes a pit stop.
Jerry Grant, 3 abreast going down into the pit lane.
Makes a pit stop.
Tons of cars going in down there as we pass by Joe Leonard. So lots of guys are going to be losing time early on in this race. But the leaders have pretty much stayed kind of together here in terms of nobody's really had a lot of trouble up front. Again, Bobby Unser kind of lurking there in the top 10 in the Roadster, the front engine car. Mario Andretti is up to 20th now with all the trouble of everybody else. Bud Tingelstad, Al Unser Sr., Joe Leonard. AJ Foyt is all the way to last, so is it possible that AJ Foyt is out of the Indianapolis 500? Boy, wouldn't that be just a shocker after going 160 miles per hour in qualifying. He's not going to he's not really going to get much of a shot, is he? And I believe that is him in the pits, the first car in the pits. So it appears like there are 2 cars out of the race. One is a rear engine car, that being AJ Foyt, and a front engine car who I haven't identified yet, as car 18 is in trouble. Arnie Knepper. Knepper is in trouble again, so another crash. Thankfully, I've kind of avoided some of it, at least early on. Haven't seen a whole lot of nonsense. From my seat, anyway. Of course, as we get closer, and Mario Andretti is up to 9th. Mario Andretti is up to 9th. Bobby Unser is falling through the field, so Bobby Unser, carrying the hopes and dreams of the Novi front-engine cars, is dropping like a lead balloon through the field. So unfortunately, Bobby Unser not going to be able to overcome that. That's him in the pits. That was the bright orange front-engine car, kind of halfway up the pits there that you saw. So Bobby Unser is out. And the hits keep on a-coming as the field begins to get spread out and attrition begins to take its hold. Car 9 is Bobby Unser, so something happened to Unser out on track, and he's completed his pit stop. He'll get back out into the race, but obviously out of contention now for an Indy 500 win. And Dan Gurney, who had trouble early on, is now 19th, unbelievably. Still on the lead lap, ironically enough, as well. He's the second car, I believe, up in the picture, who may end up getting lapped depending on how this traffic goes. And it looks like we're starting to hit fairly heavy traffic. Not just the car ahead of me directly, but there's probably 3 or 4 cars up ahead of him, all together in a group. So which car is this? Who is this we're coming up on? It's definitely a rear engine car. I don't think there's really a question about that. We're not going to see a whole lot of front engine cars in this race. But it might be a Hallebrand, and that would mean it might be Joe Leonard. Well, actually, Joe Leonard is a, actually in the history books, a motorcycle champion. It's Johnny Rutherford, never mind. I thought it was a Hallebrand, and I actually was able to correctly identify the chassis, but it's actually the Hallebrand of Johnny Rutherford, Lone Star JR, who's not having the best run in his second Indianapolis 500, but we'll dive underneath Rutherford and take that track position right there. But Rutherford's car is pretty fast on the straight line, but not too bad. As I run kind of a high groove, I think Rutherford's going to send it up the inside. He's trying to stay on the lead lap, and we'll let him around for now. Okay, well, that's interesting. Johnny Rutherford really showing that he's got some moxie through turns 1 and 2, being able to retake that position from me. Now we'll get to the inside of him, retake that position, and hopefully be able to get away from Johnny. This car was really struggling for grip there, but we got around him. Kind of had to drive a little harder than I wanted to. But Rutherford, boy, I'm glad he's in 20th, because otherwise he might be a pretty stout competitor for the win. And Jim Clark has now fallen to 12 seconds behind. So we're in good shape from that perspective. I believe Eddie Johnson is that roadster that is DNF'd from the race. So a shame for Eddie Johnson in one of the roadsters that maybe could have played a bit of a spoiler today. But not this year. Not this year for the roadsters. Mario Andretti is up to 7th from 30th on the grid. Unbelievable. Amazing what would have happened, or think about what it might have been if he'd started near the front. But regardless, coming in behind one of the Watson rear-engine cars, Jim McElreath, powered by an Offenhauser engine, as you can tell by the single exhaust pipe coming out of the rear. 4-cylinder engine versus my V8 engine, and not really a contest. 4 extra cylinders helping me get around down the main straightaway as we complete lap number 16. The last lap was at 163 miles an hour. Quite nice. Yeah, McElreath's not falling back too much. Interesting. Seems like they definitely have the cornering capability over me, but once I get on the straightaway, it's so long. As we're going to go down the back straightaway here, get a nice tow off of this purple car up here, which I suspect is either George Snyder or his teammate. because those would be the only 2 purple cars in the field. And it's Ronnie Duman. So, yeah, George Snyder's teammate and another one of the Watson offies. We're going to get a run behind Duman. Down the main straightaway. This is going to be kind of a late... Oh, late move. Well, it's a late move because I hit him. Down into turn 1. That's a sneeze. Sorry. And make that pass. Well, it wasn't the cleanest pass in the entire world, but we got around him. Now heading down the back straightaway. And I think finally, we might actually lap Dan Gurney. I think Gurney's running a fairly fast pace, though. Remember, he's got a Lotus, and the car's starting to slide a little bit. So in the next couple of laps, it's going to be time to come into the pits, I suspect. Not right now, not just yet. But in the next few laps, it'll be time to come in. Let's head down the main straightaway in the draft of Dan Gurney. Not particularly that close at the moment. Just keeping the car right along the white and yellow line down there, designating the pit exit on this version of Indianapolis. Of course, the apron and the pit exit, same thing on this track. Which is always an interesting thing, because people are like, bring back the apron. I'm like, are you serious? Look how dangerous that is. Lifting off into turn 3. Trying to get on the throttle, trying to chase down Mr. Gurney. He's a little bit high in turn 4. Off of turn 4 now. Down the main straightaway, getting a run. But that Lotus, powered by the same Ford engine that's in the back of my Bronner, is pretty powerful. Pretty potent down the straightaway. And there's Mr. Gurney. The Lotus teammate to Clark, who runs second right now. So is there going to be any team orders to hold up land at all costs? We'll see. As Gurney's pulling away on the straightaway. I mean, he's faster on the straightaway. There's no doubt about it. Mario's up to 6th, by the way. And exactly where is Gurney running? He's got to be closer to the front than not at this point. 17th. So he's actually running in his car number spot. So good for Gurney. After starting near the back. Of course, if he'd been able to avoid some of the trouble that Mario ran into, Gurney would be running 5th or 6th right now. Because it definitely feels like the car's starting to fall off a little bit. But again, I at least want to make it halfway before I really think about pitting, because I want the tires to be somewhat good towards the end. So otherwise, racing with bad tires, no bueno. Ooh, car sliding a lot out of turn 4. My pace is definitely starting to fall off a lot. There's no doubt about that. So you may have noticed a couple of laps of silence there. Don't worry, I didn't die. But not only are my tires failing me, my body's failing me right now. I've been having an allergy attack during this race. So I've been sneezing for the better part of the last couple of laps. I think it's more or less past now. Hopefully I'll remember to cut all the sneezes out of the commentary track. But if I don't, I apologize for that. But anyway, we're going to try to keep going here without sneezing too much. And we are coming down to the point where I'm going to really need to come into the pits. That is going to be a big key here as we're about to start lap number 25. And then the race really begins. Because we don't quite have the delta on Jim Clark to retake the lead without even having to worry about the pit stop. See, he's down to 10 seconds in terms of the gap. Interestingly enough, goes out to 13 on the straightaways. Alright, so starting lap number 26. This is going to be the lap I'm going to come into the pits. As Dan Gurney really sent it late on that lap car right there. Okay, so heavy traffic out in front. Time to come in. Time to come in. So I'm going to get on the brakes. Get into the pits. No pit limit, but, you know. Alright, we are going to change tires. We're going to, we'll go with a full load of fuel. Since it's only going to be 7 seconds anyway. Changing to the tires. Getting it all done. And we'll be back out of the pits fairly shortly. We'll wait for Jim Clark to come by. There he goes. So Clark has the lead. And we'll see where we cycle out of the pits. Looking behind, got another car coming by. We're fourth right now. That, I believe, is Don Branson.
A great pit stop for car number 71.
So there's where we cycle through the field. And that is Bobby Unser, Uncle Bobby, making a big move in the front engine car down to the inside. But my straight line speed a little bit better than Uncle Bobby. So we'll see if we can pass the Novi going into turn 3, which we do. No problemo, but that car is very loud behind me, and I almost hit the wall in turn 3 looking behind me. Don't look in the mirrors when you're exiting turn 3, kids. Okay, so 5th position. And we are exactly how far behind Jim Clark? Not sure. We'll see. I guess I don't have gaps yet. We'll have gaps here in just a second as we look at the top 10. Okay, so 14 seconds behind Jim Clark. Now what's interesting is that in 25 laps, I was able to put just about that kind of distance between myself and Jim Clark. So even if they didn't need to pit, I think we'd be good. But that doesn't mean I'm going to push, or I'm not going to push here. Because it's go time in the Indy 500. It's time to take the lead on merit, because you just don't know where everybody else is going to cycle around to. That's what makes these races so interesting. You never know what's going to happen until the end. So, already cut the gap to Clark. We're certainly cutting it to Branson here. Should be around him within the next couple laps. Unless I spin on the apron, which I almost did there. That would have been embarrassing. Gonna try to get some revenge for Trenton on Branson. We had a duel. We came together kind of Al Unser Jr. and Emerson Fittipaldi style. I was Al Jr. in that scenario. And he was Mo. So I run right down on the white line. Big run out of turn 3. Tiny lift into turn 4. And down the main straightaway behind Don Branson. Can I get the job done? Not right now. Branson will hold me off into turn 1. For now. Oh, the car was sliding real bad in turn 1. Maybe used a little bit too much of the apron. Try to go a little bit wider this time in turn 2. That's a good run, but will I have the straight line speed on Branson? Ford engine in his car, Ford engine in mine. Down the inside, look at that. As late as I could possibly dare to go to the inside of Branson. To the inside of turn 3, Branson lifts out. Very respectful driving there for Branson. Not racing me too hard. And now Lloyd Ruby is going to be the next car I will have to pass. He runs 3rd right now. 8 seconds up the road. But with 20 laps to go, again, I'm feeling kind of confident about being able to chase them down, even if it comes down to a sprint where they don't have to pit. Because my tires are in fantastic condition right now. Got a full load of fuel, don't have to worry about either of those things. And those are the things that have kind of screwed me over in the last couple of Indy 500s. Already got a second on Don Branson. He's actually gaining a little bit on the straightaway. I suspect part of that is the draft that's helping him out. Really sending it now through the corners. Kind of unlocking the potential of this Brawner Indy car, which I haven't really used all that much. I've kind of been conservative throughout the race, throughout qualifying. And now it's time to see what it's got. With 32 laps completed of 50. Running hard through turn 1. Hard through turn 2. Just barely lifting in the second half of the corners. Down the back straightaway, already making up just oodles and oodles of time on Lloyd Ruby. I think that's him just out in front. Big lift into turn 3. It kind of went in a little wider than I would have liked. A little wider than I would have liked. Maybe this isn't Ruby up here. I think Ruby may be further up the road. So this may be a lap car. May have been wrong. But anyway, we're making up time on whoever's in front of me, regardless of who they are. Crossing the line. Still haven't seen... Okay, 164. So running 164 mile an hour laps. Still not quite at the 165 I set early on in the race. So I'm not sure how or when I did that, but that was a good lap. Wish I could have a few more of those right now, but we are 6.5 seconds away from Lloyd Ruby right now. So we're in good shape in terms of that. It's certainly pulling the gap out on Don Branson. No doubt about it. To get through turn 3 very nicely. McCluskey again. On the throttle. Should have a good run on him. And easily be able to pull out and pass him down the main straightaway. He didn't fight it too hard, which is nice. Appreciate the courtesy, Mr. McCluskey. And into turn one once again, kind of keeping the back end sliding out just a little bit. Almost exactly 5 seconds to to Lloyd Ruby now. And really pounding the pavement, getting away from Don Branson as well. It's out to 4 seconds that I've put on Branson in just the last few laps. So really doing an outstanding job getting away from him. And the tires are going to start to wear toward the end of this race. But hopefully once we get to that point, we'll be in the lead, so we won't have to worry about it. Probably got a good, well, it said 8 seconds to Clark. 8 seconds to make up to Clark. And right now we're pretty much directly in between the gaps of Branson and Ruby. And then once we get up to Ruby, it seems like they're all really kind of in a group. Ruby, Parnelli, and Clark, all together. So it's going to be essentially a pack race, one way or the other, battling all of them at once for the win in the Indy 500. So run through turn 3. And turn 4, again, really starting to make up some big time here. Seeing the big pack of cars is just kind of egging me on. Keep going faster. Keep trying harder and harder. Get up there and go racing. That's what we're going to try to do. 162 on the last lap. Kind of didn't get through turn 1 very well there. The car kind of stepped out a little bit. Right down on the line. Out of the corner. I think this is a lap car out in front of me. Don't think it's Ruby. There's a lot of cars up here. Lap cars and lead lap cars. Which is going to make this process a little bit tougher than it otherwise would have been. McElreath. Please be kind. He wasn't particularly the most kind. I tried to drive around the outside of him. Didn't quite work out. Lost a little bit of time to Ruby, actually, through there. So drive through turn number 1. More lap traffic. So these are the lap cars I've already lapped once. Gonna have to lap them again before I can get to Ruby and Clark and Jones. Ronnie Duman. Just out in front. That was not a good spot for me to catch him. Hopefully I can pass him between the short chute and turn 4. Yes, I can, just barely. I actually hit him the last time, too, so yeah, that's not very fun. But we got around him, and we now have 13 laps to go, or thereabouts. As Ruby, Clark, and Jones are just out in front. That's the 3 cars all together in a group, I believe. And they're 3 seconds up the road. So, can we get our first Indy 500 win? Haven't gotten one yet. Certainly looking for it. As Ruby passes a car just in front of him, so never mind, that was a lap car. I keep bringing a modern racing slant into this and not kind of realizing that there's always going to be lap cars, especially this late in a race, involved in the leader battle. So all the cars immediately ahead of you aren't necessarily the leaders of the race. There's probably 6 to 10 cars directly in front as well. So that's going to make things very interesting. And hopefully... Ooh, as that was wall contact. Hopefully nobody does what I did just there, except for not with the wall, but with a lap car and cause a big old pile up. Take a whole bunch of us out of the race. I would not like that to happen. So 2 seconds is the gap to Ruby. And there was some tire smoke up there as the leaders are starting to get held up in lap traffic. I can see it just up in front. Cars side by side in turn 4. And that's usually asking for trouble. So we're going to look for Joe Leonard here, but also kind of keep our eye on the proceedings a little bit further up the road, because you just don't know if somebody's going to get turned in traffic. I think possibly Parnelli's trying to go for the lead right now. I'm going to try to keep my focus on Leonard right now, because he's kind of being a bit of a pain right now as I get the car sliding just a little bit. Dive up the inside of Joe Leonard, so now I'm in direct contact with the leaders, despite the fact that I am farther back a little bit from Ruby. And I think Ruby is side by side with Jones, who's side by side with Clark. That's one of the greatest Indy 500 battles of all time happening right in front of me.
Makes a pit stop.
As car 76 is in the pits. So is this going to be the leaders coming into the pits at some point? Clark still leads according to the timing and scoring, but it may not have updated just yet. 1.4 seconds to Ruby. Big group of cars up here to try to pass. This car's not quite sitting in the groove the way I'd like it to. Down the back straightaway. Clark is still in the lead, 3 seconds ahead of Gurney. Or, sorry, ahead of Jones.
A great pit stop for car number 76. Car number 76
9
is
to go.
smoking. Car number 76 is limping back
Boy,
to
poor
the
car
pits.
76.
Car number 18 makes a pit stop.
So here we go. We're getting some pit stops from what I assume are some of the leaders. Jerry Grant in the yellow car. I may have mistaken for Jim Clark at one point. Dive up the inside of Jerry Grant. Car 48. Try to pass him, not really being able to do it quite as effectively as I would have liked. But finally get around him nonetheless. And now looking for Lloyd Ruby. So there's a front engine roadster in the mix as well up here. But we're within striking distance of Ruby.
Car number 18.
It's now time to pass him. We'll at least get third. I'm starting to worry. Are the leaders going to pit? I guess we'll find out. We will find out. 12 is making a pit stop. That is Mario Andretti. So one of the leaders, but not the leader we need. We need 82. If we are 82, 98, or 7, that's what we need. But right now, we're looking at car 7 in the draft, driving underneath one of the roadsters. And an easy pass on Hurtubise for Lloyd Ruby.
No fuel this time for car number 76.
76 still just getting out of the pits. Don't know which car that is. This car really not liking the traffic right now. That's Johncock, Gordon Johncock. That's another one of the front engine cars.
Car number 76.
Get a really nice run on Jim Hurtubise, going down the back straightaway underneath Hurtubise and make the move. So still not quite able to catch Ruby. Running right down along the white line, off of turn 4. Accelerate down the main straightaway. Get a run behind Ruby.
Car number 4 makes a pit
Starting to get
stop.
nervous about this. We're hearing lots of pit stops, but again, none of the leaders are pitting.
Car number 53 makes a pit stop.
Man, oh man, oh man.
Car number 47 makes a pit stop.
You'll lose an Indy 500 this way. That would be interesting. Pitting out of the lead after having a big lead. Then again, Don Branson is in because he's now 30 seconds behind. That would imply to me that he's been in the pits. So is it just a matter of time until the leaders come in? We'll wait and see. We're at 6 laps to go.
Car number 16 makes a pit stop. A great pit stop for car number 4. Car number 19 makes a pit stop.
Lots of cars are making pit
Car
stops.
number 54 makes a pit
And
stop.
is anyone coming into the pits this time? Yes! Yes!
Car number 59 makes a
Parnelli
pit stop.
Jones,
That
Jim
was a
Clark
slow stop for
into
car
the
number
pits. There's
47.
Clark. We pass him. We pass Clark. So into the lead with 5 laps to go in the Indianapolis 500 is my Bronner. My Bronner Ford into the lead with 5 to go. And of course, Lone Star JR up here. He's actually been running pretty strong, despite the fact that he had trouble early on.
Pit stop for car number 16.
I think this is Maston Gregory up just ahead of him. Should get a big run down the back straightaway. Not particularly all that interested in going too hard right now. 17 into the pits, so Dan Gurney making another stop. That's actually Johnny Boyd, not Maston Gregory. So now I'm 17 seconds, 16, 17 seconds ahead of Jim Clark, and nearly getting contact in traffic with Johnny Rutherford right there. But everybody able to make it through right there. So lap 46. And now some clean track out in front.
That was a slow stop for car number 17.
As I ran a little bit high in the groove there in turn 2. Still looking at Johnny Boyd behind, but
That was a slow stop for
no
car
trouble
number
yet.
88.
20 seconds. 20 seconds is the gap to Jim Clark. So I ran the correct strategy. Now it's just hold on. This is essentially the qualifying run that I did earlier. All over again. Just keep it on the black stuff. And take your first Indy 500 win. The Unser brothers are together. Bobby and Al in 19th and 20th. Interesting to see. 4 to go. So qualifying run underway. And the way this started is the way it may end, though we've got worn tires this time versus fresh tires. That's going to make a little bit of a difference. But again, with an 18-second lead, it's really just going to be a matter of nursing the car to the finish. Not taking risks at all. Certainly no unnecessary ones. So I pick up the throttle through turn 3, just keeping it nice and tidy, well away from the wall. That's all we need to do. All we need to do. Off of turn 4. And looking at 3 laps to go as we cross the line right there. 161 on the last lap. Still faster than the second place car on the grid. So really running good, fast laps at the moment. Down the back straightaway. No pressure from behind, no pressure in front. This is the way you want to do it. Almost 50 minutes gone by. It's usually about how long these Indy 500s last. Even in the Roadster days, ironically enough. Or at least in this game, in the Roadster days, I should say. Down the main straightaway. Johnny Rutherford's up to 8th, so great for him. Mario Andretti's actually fallen to 15th. 2 to go. 2 laps. 5 miles to Indianapolis 500 glory. 21, almost 22 seconds back to Clark. So really done a good job here with the strategy and building the gap in the right way. Jim Clark, of course, won this race in real life in 1965. So it's amazing that we're able to beat him, change history, and all that good stuff. As I come out of turn number 4, gonna see the white flag this time around. 2.5 miles to go to my first Indy 500 win. Seen the championship, seen the race wins, but not the biggest one. Through turn 1 and 2. Nice and cautious through 2. No need to push too hard. Down the back straightaway. I think we've pretty much got it at this point. Unless something absolutely spectacular happens here in 3 and 4. Lifting off nice and early, trying to keep in a rhythm still. Don't want to be too conservative because sometimes you can crash being too conservative. Through turns 4. 3 and 4, now out of turn 4. Could coast home from here is the old saying, the old adage, but we are going to take victory in the 1965 Indianapolis 500. Buttermilk. So there you go. Victory in the Indianapolis 500. Jimmy Clark well back in the field. 7 cars finishing on the lead lap. Johnny Rutherford first car a lap down. Dan Gurney 9th place. Didn't quite get a point there for Gurney. Clark does get 2nd. Parnelli 3rd. Ruby 4th. Branson 5th. Hasgen 6th. And Cheeseburg 7th after almost getting bumped from the field down through the rest of the field. You can see Eddie Johnson and AJ Foyt didn't last for very long. Many cars out of the race. Lots of accidents and whatnot. So yeah, victory at Indianapolis. As Tony Kanaan once said, my big ugly mug is going on that trophy. The 1965 winner of the Indianapolis 500. So after 2 races, it's actually a tie at the top of the championship standings. Me and Don Branson are tied. Lloyd Ruby is in 3rd. Jim Clark is in 4th. Next up is the Milwaukee 100, and this year's championship is 7 rounds. I believe the first time we will go to Riverside Raceway is in this season, the first road course of the career mode. So thank you guys so much for watching. I finally got the Indianapolis 500 win, so be sure to leave a like on the video for that, and we'll see you in the next video.